I can't explain to my kids exactly what I do. I can't explain to my grandparents when I entered this business because broker is a very cliche term. Like, you have kids who say, I want to become a doctor. Some say, I want to become a policeman. Have you ever heard a kid say, I want to become a broker? Like, it's a joke. If you throw a stone in some cities in India, it will fall on the head of the engineer, right? And so many doctors, so many chartered accountants.
Quarter 1 of 2024 witnessed a substantial growth of about 43% in the office market consumption.
Perhaps this is the first time, generally real estate, the growth vectors are positive for all sectors. Over the last 30 years, until the last 2-3 years, the IT services firms were 40% of the market. We are still a market where the interest rates are where they are versus the world. Although our interest rates increased by only about 200 basis points, so it went from 6% to 8%, whereas the world went from 0 or 1% to 5%. So it's a 5 times.
What has caused this stability of 4 to 5% increase in the rental price for the past 6 to 7 years?
There's a 5% rule. If you up your game 5% of the times in your life, 95% of your life is sorted out.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Speaking Real Estate Podcast. Today with us we have Mr. Viral Desai, who is the Senior Executive Director at Knight Frank India. He is responsible for transactions at Occupier Strategy and Solutions, Retail Agency, Capital Markets, and Industrial and Logistics. Our today's main discussion is going to be revolving around the changing dynamics of the office market in Quarter 1 of 2024. Knight Frank recently released their report on office and residential market in top 8 cities of India, which include Mumbai, Hyderabad, Pune, Kolkata, Chennai, Bangalore, Ahmedabad, and NCR. We are attaching a link in our description to download that report so that you can have a better idea of office and residential market in Quarter 1 2024. Our today's discussion is going to be around the office market only. We are going to discuss what are the driving forces behind the increasing office market in nation, how these 8 cities have responded to the nation's growth in terms of increasing office market share, what are the different sectors that comprise of the office market, such as flex places, global capability centers, and how these sectors have contributed to the increasing office market share. We are also going to discuss the past rental level trends in India and what is the expected rental levels in the future. And in the end, we are also going to discuss what are the key factors that will influence the office market in the remaining quarters of 2024 and beyond. And also, we are going to know more about Mr. Viral Desai. Hello, Viral sir.
Hi, thank you for having me today. And I'm glad that, what you're pursuing and what you're doing. This is just fantastic. And I'm sure, with all the shows that you are conducting, this one would also add to in the larger picture of what you're doing. So thank you.
It's a pleasure of mine to host you here and gain a lot of knowledge from you today. So normally we start off by knowing the education journey and career journey of our guest. It would be great to start off with your education journey.
I'm sure, unlike some of your distinguished guests that have come here, I'm not one of those front benchers through my educational journey. Having said that, when you are a backbencher, you get a wider view. You don't just see the blackboard, but you see everything around, and that's what has largely helped me in life. Of course, to add, what you learn practically in life, I further did a executive MBA from SP Jain, and I plan to do something there was a general management program, and now, perhaps later this year, I may also want to do a advanced management program from one of the B schools outside India. And the idea is really you keep learning, you keep coming across new things, which adds to, your overall repertoire.
Did you think education played an important role in your career? Because different people have different opinions, and at times people have mentioned that the experience have played a more major role in their career more than their education. So what's your opinion on that?
So I'll answer this in 2 parts. Absolutely, education matters because my sons also will be perhaps seeing this. So, but otherwise as well, I think education will definitely matters. It makes you go through the grind of analyzing and understanding things, which you then practically adapt to. But I would highly recommend to say that after a few years of working, you must go back to school, because that's when you really realize the importance of education. And when you look back in the hindsight, a lot of things that you learned across subjects, which you may or may not be implementing in your daily lives, but they help you in a different way to build a perspective. So education certainly helps. But I also tell you, success in life, the biggest factor which affects success. Let's look at some of the fields. So if you want to become a cricketer in India, you're competing against over 1 billion people, right? If you are an engineer, I think we churn out about 500,000 engineers annually in India. So as a cumulative mass, I don't know how many millions or engineers. Like it's a joke. If you throw a stone in some cities in India, it will fall on the head of the engineer, right? And so many doctors, so many chartered accountants. Now the trade that we are in, we are a professional services consulting firm, within which we deal with real estate. So to make a comparison, the general consulting firms are the big four, the boutique three, and we are also a professional services consulting firm, but focused on real estate. So, and comparatively, there are about 5 or 6 in the world who have a global presence. So where I was coming from is that competition is a huge factor in your success. Now, in the domain that we are in, across the 5 or 6 firms, there are only about 1,500 of us across the country. And when you break that down to a city, the 8 key markets, you're competing with 200 and 250, right? And then when you add some years of experience to it, you go up the ladder. You add some hard work, you go up the ladder. You add whatever you little bit learned as a backbencher in school, you go up in the ladder. So I never aspired to become a commercial real estate broker. Of course, I manage a business as well. And funnily, I can't explain to my kids exactly what I do. I can't explain to my grandparents when I entered this business, because broker is a very cliched term. But it is so rewarding. It is actually there's very, very limited competition. You have the best developers, private developers, the likes, about 15 or 20 in the country who are of large scale and size. And you have some of the largest funds who own 50-60% of commercial real estate in the country. And you have the best clients. You have a plethora of multinational clients, the big names that you all of us hear about. You have so many large Indian corporates who are taking quality buildings. And you are in that business in the middle of the two and advising some of the key people on both the sides. And that being a backbencher, and I never aspired to be in this business. I have never come across a broker who says, you have kids who say, I want to become a doctor. Some say, I want to become a policeman. Have you ever heard a kid say, I want to become a broker? So you are in this business by luck. It's a extremely rewarding business, and there are only 1,500 across the country. It's a huge potential growing at, you will have some of the numbers in the way it is growing. Indian economy is doing very, very well. So here I am. So education is important. But I think this competitive landscape and what you are doing, if you analyze that and break it down, it's not that bad for any sector, but especially to be in this sector that I'm part of.
So we know that you are with Knight Frank organization for about 17 years till date. So, and also we know that Knight Frank has an international presence all across the world, offering different kind of services. It would be great if you can elaborate a little bit on its presence in the various nations across the world and different kind of services it offers.
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are a professional services organization. and we take great pride in providing highly customized solutions. We're the only IPC or international property consultant which is privately held, and I'll explain what it means. So we have about 455 offices across the world. North America, mainland Europe, UK, Africa, Middle East, Asia, Far East Asia, the Asia Pacific region within Australia and New Zealand. And we are globally headquartered out of London. And within India, we have 8 offices. We are headquartered out of Mumbai. Globally, we are a 130 plus year old business. So that's the legacy that we hold. In India, we set up in 1995. We offer 4 large key buckets of services. The transactions management business, which I manage across the country. The advisory services, which is research, valuation and consulting. And then the project management and facility management. Within the transaction services, there are sub-verticals. So the occupier strategy and solutions, which deals with office segment. Industrial and warehousing, which deals with the industrial manufacturing and warehousing business. Then we have residential, we have capital markets, we have retail, hospitality. So that's the transactions piece. So, why we a little bit on Knight Frank, and I mentioned at the beginning that we are a professional services firm which is privately held. So I'll just make a distinction of what is a professional services firm and what it means to be a privately held services firm. If you travel outside Bombay, usually you would fly. Let's say a particular airline which has a very large market share, right? Or any airline. What is the thing that you like about that airline?
Service.
What?
Mainly
What service?
that the flights are not getting delayed.
Do they customize anything for you?
No.
So it's basically you are choosing them because there's a certain routine and that is the routine that is followed. Now look at our services. Each client that we engage with, whether it's on the industrial or manufacturing side, which is trying to set up a factory across any sector, or any offices, across a technology sector, banking, will have very distinct needs. They will have, depending on what is the kind of talent they want, depending on type of work, within a certain sector they want, depending on which location, etc., etc. Then, of course, there's cost, quality aspects. So we offer very customized solutions, right? So our business line, professional services, has to offer highly customized solutions, and hence the labor intensity or the skill of the people has to be very high. So high on labor intensity, high on customization. So you can only offer customization when you have high on skills. This is visible again in general consulting firms. Mostly they are all privately held partnership firms, like the Big Four, like the Boutique 3. Who is the most famous lawyer? Do you know? Anyone name?
Vadia and Gandhi.
Right. And personally, any lawyer that you know?
Not being that much engaged in the business.
Let's say
date.
the late Mr. Ram Jethmalani.
Yes.
Right. Do you even know which firm he worked for or which firm he represented?
No.
So in professional services business, you can have an individual who can be bigger than the firm.
Yes.
Right. But generally the blend is that you have a platform and you have an individual who is very high on skill and who offers very high levels of customization, right? So that is meant to be a partnership firm. So you will have law firms which are partnership firms, consulting firms which are partnership firms, investment banking firms which are partnership firms, and also property consulting firms which should be. So we are the only one which are a partnership firm. Some of our competitors, most of our competitors are publicly held. So we are only answerable to our clients, and that's why you have all professional services firms that are privately held because they don't have shareholder pressure. They don't have quarterly results to show, which means you are answerable to. So that's the biggest differentiator. And usually professional services firms, the biggest asset that they have is people who deliver the service. right? Now, they ought to be debt-free, because if you take out the people, what is the asset that you have? You don't have a land building like you know. So it's the people, right? So the quick checks for a good professional services firms would be that they are privately held, they are partnership firms hence, and they have cash reserves. So they're always focused on client delivery, right? So that is what Knight Frank is, and that's a culture across the globe, whether it's headquarters, whether it's India. And of course, India, we are 100% owned by the UK partnership. But culturally, it's the same thing as the delivery of service comes from the ethos of the company, which is more like a partnership firm.
Got it. You are heading 4 different verticals for Knight Frank India for the nation. Maybe can we start off by talking about each of these business verticals for a brief amount of time to get an idea about each of the business verticals, starting with occupier strategy and solutions?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, in my career of over 2 decades now, perhaps this is the first time that generally real estate, the growth vectors are positive for all sectors as the sub-sectors of real estate. So if you look at the cycle before COVID, residential wasn't doing very well, right? But commercial was doing very well. Industrial and manufacturing was in between. Retail was also kind of maybe in between. Hotels was struggling now. And we can go into reasons for it. Residential is, of course, doing extremely well. And there are fundamental reasons for it. Commercial real estate, which is, the occupier strategy and solutions business, that is doing extremely well. Industrial and manufacturing is doing well. And retail and hospitality also are doing very well. Now, specific to commercial real estate, I think the key reasons are the Indian economy is a silver lining. We are commercial real estate demand in India sits on 2 large demand drivers. One is the demand coming for commercial office space from India-facing businesses, which means any company set up in India, whether Indian or multinational, which is catering to the Indian consumer, right? And that is across any sector. So when they take space, the second is the technology sector. So the technology sector will be, you may do a BPO, you may do a KPO, you may do more complex technology solutions. You can be a captive setup, etc. You can do data science. You can do several things. And so that is the second bucket. Now, we just spoke that the Indian economy is doing very well. So you have one bucket as a result of that doing very well. And the India incorporation overall has gone through some big structural changes. They have cleaner balance sheets, all the mess of the NPAs are gone, etc. So there is a move towards volume and there is a move towards quality. So, most organizations, or rather, it's by regulation, organizations have to report ESG on a quarterly basis now. So they will also consume real estate, which is ESG compliant. So there's a move towards quality. And because the Indian economy is a shining light, generally, even what's happening in the world, these are all adding capacities. Plus, India-facing business, we don't realize today in Bombay, but in other parts of the world and in other parts of India, there's still return to work is 50-60%. There's still a hybrid environment. Bombay is, 100% more or less, we don't realize it. So in the India-facing business also, the return to work is sort of 100%. So it's move upward, move in quality, volume, and of course, return to work. On the other side, the technology sector, I think India offers such value to the global markets that one, of course, it started 30 years back when Genpact first set up their global outsourcing to India in the early 90s on cost arbitrage. But I think we've gone up the value chain in the kind of work that we're doing. So it started from call centers when someone picked up the phone and said, I'm ABC and I'll help you for someone in North America. Now that business is very small. I mean, it is there, but it's not the big business. The big business is that we've gone up in the value chain in terms of the technology work we are doing. And why? Because we have great talent and we have talent in volume. So we have different segments of employable engineering talent, different segments of the STEM talent overall, maths or, technology or, electronics or science overall. So we have gone up in the value chain and more complex work is happening out of India. Plus, is still, so I can scale up at the pace that I want, is still extremely affordable. It's got some of the best developers because the commercial real estate space is consolidated. 15, 20 large developers across the country and a few large funds who own commercial real estate who are developing great quality. So for a global multinational, you are getting fantastic value. And the best part is, today the weighted average rent in the country is about 85 rupees across India. And that's $1 a square feet. When outsourcing first happened in India, the dollar to the rupee was 40 and the weighted average rent was 40. So I am in 30 years paying $1 a square foot. And I have gone up in the value chain in terms of the kind of work that's happening in India. And I'm getting great quality with great ownership. So, and this technology sector, when the world does well across sectors, because you have to think that even JP Morgan has technology set up in India, so it's a bank. Smith's Detection are these X-ray machines that you have at the airport. They have a technology setup. So it's not just technology companies. Anything and everything Unilever will have a global capability center either directly or indirectly in India, right? So when the world does well, people spend on technology and so jobs come to India. When the world does badly, people cut on jobs, on high-paying jobs in the mature markets, and they send jobs to India. So this will always do well, regardless. So both buckets are doing very well on commercial real estate. And as I mentioned at the beginning, all segments of real estate for the first time are
moving ahead
at the same time. And India is perhaps the best performing real estate market in the world today. We've surpassed the volumes of pre-COVID, so 2019, in most segments of work, or we will be surpassing. And there is a fundamentally strong story for all of these things to happen. It's not hype. You don't take space on lease as a speculation, only when you need it, And even in the residential sector, end users are buying. There's no speculative buy. And you have to give credit. There's been some structural changes with respect to GST, RERA, demonetization, some of these
premium benefits.
Then you have, the cleaning of the NPAs, all of those things are contributing. So the income levels have gone up. So the affordability index, which we track as a firm, which our research does, continuously shows that is the reason residential is doing well.
Last year's quarter report also mentioned that the middle segment out of the three segments was the largest share in terms of buying houses, whereas in 2022, the affordable segment, which is lower than buying houses which costed less than 50 lakhs, was having the highest share. So it has increased from 2022 to 2023. And I hope we can expect the same for 2024.
Absolutely. I mean, see, every party comes to an end and then there's an hangover the next day. We are far from it, so the party is still on.
Will be going on for a decade. That is what everyone predicts today.
So I'm saying overall India, we are in a great space. And then you have because what is happening, and real estate is a big part of the GDP to the country, and these are fundamentally and structurally good reasons to be to why things are going on.
Understood. So my next question was going to be that what are the driving forces that are making the office market of the nation move forward? But since now we have already talked and discussed about the whole driving forces that is making the nation go forward, So moving on, we'll move to the office highlights of quarter 1 of 2024. So let's go back to the basics. What are the different sectors that comprise the whole office market?
So the way we track this, I think we look at the use of space, right? So we call it out into four large buckets. One is the India-facing business. The second is the global capability center. The third is the IT services firms, and the fourth is the managed office providers. As the four buckets, and I'll explain. So, as mentioned earlier, the India-facing business is any company set up in India which is catering to the Indian consumer, and that could be across sectors. That could be FMCG.
So Indian facing businesses are those MNCs which set up their business in India and are serving the Indian consumers.
Yes, and Indian companies as well. So whether it's a Indian or a multinational company which is set up to serve to the Indian consumer, right? And that could be across sectors. That could be banking, that could be NBFCs, FMCG, retail, manufacturing. So, a Siemens, a Caterpillar, anything, right? So that is one bucket. And why we track it? Because they behave in different ways. And I'll explain. The second big bucket is global capability centers, which means a multinational company which is set up a capability center doing technology work, finance work for its global operations, not for the India business. It could be an Amazon, a Google, which has a captive setup, which is its own setup in India, employed on the roles of that company to deliver global work, right? And it could be technology, it could be finance, it could be anything. So that is the second segment of the work. The third segment of the work is IT services firms. So some of the large, the Cognizants, the Infosys, the TCS, Wipro, IBM, Accenture, that falls into that bucket. What do they do? The nature is outsourcing, but the earlier bucket of global firms, when they don't set up their base in India, but they outsource it to these companies, which is what happened to India 30 years back. Genpact, was the first global multinational which set up an outsourcing hub, and it provided services to all GE companies, and then it expanded to other companies as well, right? That's the IT revolution, ITES revolution in the country. So this is a third segment of work, and they were the flag bearers of commercial real estate in the country, because that's how IT outsourcing came into the country. And the fourth segment is the managed offices, which can consume any of these three sectors. When a managed service provider takes space and sells it by the seat or customized solution, it can be an India-facing company, it can be a GCC, it can be an IT services company, right? The fourth sector consumes all. So over the last 30 years, until the last 2-3 years, the IT services firms were 40% of the market. Because every time when you first outsourced, it's not very easy for a multinational to come to India and to set up. But the ease of doing business, the Indian market itself as a appeal factor, that is all the discovery later. But first when they came, they would say, let me go to a TCS, let me go to an Infosys, etc. So they outsource work, and they are very, very large. That segment was consuming millions of square feet of space. That segment has sort of changed now to less than 10% of the overall absorption in the country.
Less than 10%, from 40% to...
Yes, erstwhile 40%, 3, 4, 5 years back, to less than 10%. And it's not that they are not taking space, it's just that
others are taking more space.
Others are taking far more space. So, if let's say a Siemens was giving work, or a Cognizant or a JP Morgan Chase was giving work, they're still giving work, but they have now found comfort that I can set up my own captives, right? And it's also driven by the fact that after COVID, I may be able to take more prime space rather than outsource. Now I have been in India for the last 20-30 years doing my global work, so I have the conviction that I can do it on my own. So the first generation wave there'll be millions of other companies who will still continue, and this is a very large segment, IT services, which will grow. But it's a little bit of a change in leaderboard that is happening. So India-facing business is about 35%. Global capability centers are 35%, put together 70%. This is about 10-11%, and the rest, I think 20% is the managed office, which is important because given flexibility and uncertainty in the global market, it's a new sort of segment which has emerged in the last 4-5 years. So these are the 4 large buckets of space. Also, what is a big trend, economic trend, and hence sort of playing out in the real estate absorption of space or leasing activity is that if you look at the last 50 years or 40 years, the top 10 companies in the world by market
Last
cap, last 50 years. 50 years. And if you look at it by, let's say, a decade, so, the 90s to 2000, in the top 10 companies by market cap, 6 were technology companies. And then you had the dot-com bubble, 2000. So the money flows between the old world economy and technology. So which means old world economy is banking, manufacturing, retail, anything which is more brick and mortar. The new age economy is the technology. So the next 10 years, which is from 2000 to the global financial crisis, of the top 10 companies, and I'm saying, I don't have the data, but we tracked it. Of the top 10, 7 represented the old world economy. From 2008, after the global financial crisis, the money market, there's a lot of stimulus given by central banks. So the interest rates went to 0. Or 1%, which was up to 21, 22, right? The money flow went into the technology sector again. So out of the top 10, you had Apple, Microsoft, Google, Meta, some of the Chinese, Tencent, etc., right? Now with the interest rate cycle changing, we have entered another cycle over the next 10 years where the interest rates are high at 4-5% globally. I'm saying central banks in North America, etc. The money flow goes back to the old world economy. So you will have, by the end of the next 10-year cycle, 6-7 companies which will be from the old world economy. So this is a sort of a change in economic cycle, hence a change in the leaderboard that captives in India facing, which largely represent old world economy, are taking more space. So that's the correlation that exists as it stands.
So India has been facing a steady growth in the office market consumption since the past few years. If you could just talk about the numbers of the last few years, maybe 5 years, 10 years, and how has the growth been in these past few years?
Right. So 2019, we reached the peak of commercial real estate absorption in India. We were 60 million square feet recorded. That's the highest office space absorption recorded. So that's the calendar year 2019. So 19 through 20, actually. So that year is where we saw what we saw. And then, of course, COVID happened, pandemic. So that sort of swung down to 37 million square feet in 21. And then went, I think, 38 million or thereabouts in 22. 23 is when we started seeing proper green shoots of recovery. We were, I think, little over 50 million square feet. 2023, the whole calendar year, we have almost touched to the 2019 numbers. So we are, I think, just short of 60 million. We're 59.6 million square feet. And I would attribute, and I mentioned earlier, the office market in India is the best performing commercial real estate market in the world. Most markets in the world are still about 35% down. And the main reasons I would attribute is to return to work, the quality of real estate that happens, the availability of talent, and the Indian economy doing the way it has been doing. I think it's a highly matured, evolved ecosystem. We already have, including the retail REIT, we have 4 REITs which are already being traded. You will see a couple of more REITs getting listed in this calendar year or in this the coming up financial year. You may also see the SME REIT, which SEBI has just announced, which will come by. So I think in terms of sheer numbers, I would say most markets have come back to their pre-2019 numbers, but more particularly Hyderabad, Mumbai, NCR, Chennai, Bangalore continue to be the drivers and the leaders of commercial real estate growth in the country.
Understood. Feels good that the nation is already on backtrack after suffering from the crisis of COVID. So, moving ahead, Q1 of 2024, that is from Jan to March, witnessed a substantial growth of about 43% in the office market consumption versus the annual growth rate, which has been 25%. If you could just explain that, what factors contributed to such a huge, robust growth in first quarter of this year, and do we expect the same growth in the remaining quarters of this year?
So, I will mention 2-3 quick points to this. I think the global capability centers as a bucket of growth has seen some huge upside. And what it means is, imagine a company that first outsourced work to India. So it sent out BPO work to one of the IT services firms, right? In its journey, then it went ahead and said, okay, I will do a small captive. So it set up a small captive, right? It was growing with the IT services firms as well, and then adding on the captive to a point that it has now scaled up the captive in a large way. So you have some of the large matured global GCCs in India who have 5 million square feet, employing 50,000, 60,000, 100,000 people on their own, on their roles. That same captive now sees the Indian economy doing very, very well. So they feel that now I need to set up an India-facing business. I was outsourcing earlier. Now I will set up an India-facing business. So I'll give you examples. Let's say Amazon or Google in its journey. They first outsourced, then set up captive. Then Amazon and Google came to India, I think over a long period of time now, to cater to the Indian consumer. And then, Amazon set up so many warehousing spaces to cater to the e-commerce business. It's gone into so many other segments of the business. Likewise, Google. And this is just 2 examples. You can look at any global MNC. The circle of commercial real estate is outsourcing, captive, then set up an India-facing business, then going into manufacturing. What we are going to see now is perhaps the reverse. With the whole PLI initiative by the government of India, where they are promoting incentives to companies to set up manufacturing in India, we will see they will come for manufacturing, hence they will also do technology in India, right? So global capability centers are the biggest driving factors and India-facing business. So I think in the last quarter, they saw a significant jump from under 30% to I think 37% in overall space take-up. And they take quality spaces, they take more spaces in more central locations, so they are very compliant with the ESG, etc. They are perhaps able to attract better talent, So as a combination, the GCC business and the India-facing business are the key big driving factors for the space take-up, and which is visible, and that trend continues, in the Q1 as well.
So, few cities of India, let's say Bangalore, Hyderabad, Mumbai, are having a huge amount of office consumption from the overall consumption in the nation. So, what makes these locations have the highest consumption compared to the other parts of India? Can you explain that?
So, I would say that the talent pool that is available, if you reflect back 30 years back, if someone wanted to get a job, would either go to Bombay or Delhi. but the evolution of Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, over time, and because of great engineering talent, in fact, the whole STEM talent in these cities has been a key driver. Also, I think the developers must give credit to in these markets. They've really evolved and been able to deliver what is required for a multinational company to set up campuses. At the same time, there has been this whole initiative by the government. So when IT happened in India, let's say 35 years back, you had great incentives. There was export benefits, special economic zones. There were, real estate or land parcels given to set up large campuses. I think the whole ecosystem was gearing towards, driven by the government of India and the respective state governments to grow this segment of work and to develop India into a soft power. Now, and I will just digress. So there are two significant moments in India's sort of business history, and there are several, but two. When Suzuki came to India in the early 80s, it mushroomed a huge automobile sort of boom, and a lot of auto and auto ancillary companies were set up in India. And India is a leading exporter, has so many auto and auto ancillary companies. The big other move was when Genpact came to India in the early 90s, and the whole government incentives that came with it to build the ITES industry, which is where it is billions of dollars are being generated, so much of employment. That is now happening to manufacturing. With the whole push of government towards manufacturing, global MNCs, so you hear about Tesla, you hear about the semicon companies, you hear about the automobile sector, defense sector, pharma sector, name the sector, the electronics manufacturing that's happening in India. That exact moment is happening to manufacturing in India. So you will, relating that back, I think is the old world economy in the economic cycle where the money flow is going, is the moves by the government of India, and it is the Indian consumer base which is attracting global markets because the world is aging. But India is still at an average age of 28, right? So it has a huge consumption story at various segments of economic buying power as consumers. So you will have, all segments of companies now wanting to enter the country, and that is also representative of how the space take-up is going into these 4, 5, 6 cities, as we say.
So, would want to move ahead by talking about the particular sectors in the office market. First, being the flex spaces. Firstly, what are flex spaces?
So, I think flex that happened to India as an Indian office market is been there earlier as well, but more prominently in the last 5 years. They are between the occupier or the company and the landlord or the developer. So, the developer builds commercial buildings are highly capital intensive because you build the building, you complete the building. After completion and occupation certification, 6 months later is when you start receiving full rent. Unlike residential, which is self-funding, right? So the developer is consumed, and there are reasons for it, for why it is rewarding it in its way. But the developer has consumed all the risk. Now, what are the managed office provider doing is coming in between and offering a service to the tenant to say that you mind your own business of doing your own business. I will deal with everything else. So I will lease the space, I will run the space, and I will fit out the space for you. The developer can do it, but when you are, when I make an example, I'm an automobile maker, I can make the side mirror, but I'm mainly an automobile. I can make the full car. And the company which is making the side mirrors, they are not adapted making. So it's, you have, each one has their own expertise. The managed operators are offering great flexibility to the occupier. And I think in this era during the pandemic, I think because people wanted flexibility, so they wanted shorter terms, they consumed the risk for the capital and provided that bid. Also, there is an expertise with respect to running the centers, which is another reason why managed operators did very, very well.
Coming to global capability centers, we have already talked about what are global capability centers and how they have contributed to the office market consumption. Which cities are the ones that contribute to a major chunk of the global capability centers in the country?
So I think consistently it's always the leader is Bangalore. But of course, Hyderabad, Chennai, Pune are other three cities which are very, very big. See, look, 60% of all space take up in the country is via technology companies, within which 35 to 40% is global capability centers. But the big concentration, which is driven more from a talent standpoint, I think is in these 4 or 5 cities. And we discussed about the reason. I think it's the talent, is the developers, is the cost at which it is coming through, and it's also my comfort. As an organization, when you grow to a certain scale and size in a certain location, you feel far more comfortable and you keep sort of adding to it. And I think cost of living also is a huge factor, where some of the other cities are able to provide great at a very efficient cost of living for people to talent to go and live there, and to be able to work in some of these great firms.
So you have already talked about the evolution of the rental income since past 30 years, where 30 years down the line, the rate was 40 rupees per square feet, which was $1. And today it is 80 rupees per square feet, which is $1 today. And observing that in the past 6 to 7 years, we had witnessed a consecutive growth of 4 to 5% each year. So my question is that what has caused this stability of 4 to 5% increase in the rental price for the past 6 to 7 years?
I would say that, as I mentioned earlier, I think India offers great value. Just specifically to real estate, I think super fantastic buildings made by, we should give all credit to the developer fraternity, both private developers and institutional funds who have come in now, and the quality that is being delivered. I think the rental growth in rupee terms has been steady, and what is fantastic is in dollar terms is still the same value for a multinational company. Our sense is that India should see a huge upside in terms of the value increase, right? See, we are still a market where the interest rates are where they are versus the world. Although our interest rates increased by only about 200 basis points, so it went from 6% to 8% or 7% to 9%, whereas the world went from 0 or 1% to 5%. So it's a 5 times, right? We are also evolving with a sticky inflation that exists. And I think what developers are able to do is, I think, great capital management. As I mentioned, to say that there is a commercial real estate is a very, very capital intensive business. I think they forged great partnership with international institutions who have come in together and I think distributed the risk. So at one end, there is great value. The other end is the upside, right? I think to answer your question, a consistent 5-6% rental growth, should that be a change and should that increase? Perhaps yes. Will it increase? I think it's for the events to happen. But as it may stand, I think we are deeply undervalued, is what I can tell you. Deeply undervalued for what we deliver.
Witnessing the upward trajectory in the office market consumption right now, do you believe that this is going to continue in the remaining quarters and the future years to come?
So, hard to predict beyond a year, but calendar year 2024, we should see a growth of at least 10% over calendar year 2023, right? And that again, the drivers for growth would be GCCs and India-facing business. And for all the reasons that we spoke, why it will happen. The quarter one, the average is about 16.5 million. If you just multiply that by 4 times, you will end up at 66. So, but we had called this out even at the end of 2023 that you may see a 10% increase which is steady, which is healthy, and if the IT services, which are slightly showing green shoots, they come to the party, then you will do 70 million square feet.
Coming out of the whole office market discussion, would further like to have and ask some advices from you. So since you have been part of the Knight Frank India community for about 17 years, so can you share some advice to a young guy starting his career in an organization and what thought process he should have moving forward in his career life?
Everyone, who has a goal or an objective that I want to be running a business, I want to be CEO of a company, I want to make X dollars. So one is that, what is your goal? It could be short term, long term. Then there are actions. And then third is your attitude. I think of the three, to have the right attitude, is the most important. And what is the right attitude? There are very simple things in life that you ought to do. So, if you're asked when there's something important or urgent, what would you deal with first?
Urgent?
Actually, there's nothing like urgent. When you don't deal with important, it becomes urgent.
Right.
When you don't deal with something which is important, a document, your basic studies, then you have to work the night before because it is urgent. Otherwise, you will fail tomorrow. Or someone's not well at home, you've not catered to, or your own personal health. You didn't take the right step at the right time until it became worse off and it became urgent. So there's nothing urgent in life, right? It's only important, number one. Number two, I think there is this... so let me ask you, who is the some global personality that you like, admire? Do you follow sports? No. Okay. Anyone that you admire globally, anything in music, in politics, in business, or whoever.
So starting a podcast made myself watch other people's podcast. So there's this guy called Andrew Huberman who talks about the habits of a human and various simple things in life and how you should deal with them, maybe relationships, night routine, or how to increase your productivity. All of it is backed by a science which he talks about, and it helps in understanding those concepts very easily.
So, Andrew, how much of his life does he do the podcast for? Like, for how much part of his life does he? Like, he's, let's say, I don't know how old is he, but let's say if lives a life until 80, and for what portion of the time will he be on the mic of his life? This is the part which has made him famous, is the podcast. Right? Usually what happens is, there's a 5% rule. If you up your game 5% of the times in your life, 95% of your life is sorted out. So for example, you're going for an important pitch. You're going for something which is important. And I started with urgent and important. So you give the importance. So for example, you're going for an important meeting. You reach 10 minutes earlier. Usually people are scampering to make it on time because they're thinking about, मैं पहुंचूंगा कि नहीं, traffic, where I will park, whatever, right? So you had given it importance, you reached, you're comfortable, you're there. So then you're thinking about what am I going to deliver. So you're prepared a little bit. Everyone has a normal self, which is the normal self for all the time. When you have something which is important, just raise your bar. For that moment, because everyone else is their normal self. So all the people listening to Andrew's podcast are at their normal selves. But Andrew has raised his bar and he's speaking 5% more than what he's otherwise his normal self, which is sorting out 95% of his life. And actually, physically in hours, in his lifespan, he will do a podcast only for less than 5% of his life. So it's the 95-5 rule as well, which makes you, takes you to stand out, right? Because you're prepared.
So you have been with Knight Frank for about 17 years. how have you seen the organization transform from 17 years ago till date?
So I think the greatest part about Knight Frank, and it's from the time that I've been part, and I understand it even more now, is its people centricity. And it comes from the part that we are a privately held partnership business. We take a lot of pride in personalizing our service to clients, customizing it. We have the most stable leadership in the world, also in India, and most people who work with us, they spend a long time at Knight Frank. And I think this people first attitude, which is whether it's internal or external, I think is why we are the firm that we are.
It was great to have you, Viral sir, today here, and more importantly, the kind of knowledge you have given me regarding the performance of the office market in the past decades today, and how is it going to perform in the future in a year or two. Also, the small things that you take care of in your life are a great learnings for me, and I hope to see you soon in future. You sing in Bangalore, my nanny house is there, so I might just call you up and meet you soon and try to gain more and advice and opinions from you. Thank you for coming today and giving your presence.